Thanks very much for your patience, everybody. It's taken a little longer than foreseen. I'm very pleased to have the High Representative and the Minister here to debrief you on what has happened at the Gymnich meeting. I'll hand the floor to the High Representative to start.
Thank you very much, Michael. Can I begin by thanking Linus and the Lithuanian government and people for their incredible hospitality. They've hosted foreign ministers, defence ministers, parliamentarians in the space of the last 3 days and done it with enormous grace and, of course, made sure the weather worked for us too. Colleagues, as you know, we began discussions at the Gymnich on our common security and defence policy in preparation for the report that I will submit to the summit in December. That was building on a very productive meeting of EU Ministers of Defence who met here on Thursday and Friday morning. There was a great deal of welcome for the interim report, which I can now finalise and submit to EU leaders. We also had the opportunity to look at the Commission's communication on defence and to discuss our recent operations. I really hope we will get strong support from EU leaders as we move forward on our common security and defence policy when they meet in December to discuss this. We then moved on to the preparations for November's summit in Vilnius with the countries of the Eastern Partnership. There's obviously a lot of work to be done in the lead up to the summit. We want to ensure that our partners show that they can deliver on their commitments to reform, but we also have to recognise that they face huge pressure. If we succeed, the association agreements with the deep and comprehensive free trade areas will give our partners the framework that they need for the transformation that they wish to see. In the rule of law, democracy, human rights, as well as much better access to the biggest market in the world. That will be of benefit to all of us. You will know that this morning we were joined by Secretary of State John Kerry. It was a delight to welcome him here to Vilnius. We had a number of discussions, but I wanted the conclusion of his discussions with us and then our own conclusions at the Gymnich to read out to you a statement that I want to make which reflects the agreed position of the European Union, reflects the position agreed by all member states. I'll read it out to you. It will be available to you shortly. On the 21st of August, a large-scale chemical attack was perpetrated in the outskirts of Damascus, killing hundreds of people, including many women and children. That attack constituted a blatant violation of international law, a war crime, and a crime against humanity. We were unanimous in condemning in the strongest terms this horrific attack. Information from a wide variety of sources confirms the existence of such an attack and seems to indicate strong evidence that the Syrian regime is responsible for this attack, as it is the only one that possesses chemical weapons agents and the means of their delivery in a sufficient quantity. In the face of this cynical use of chemical weapons, the international community cannot remain idle. A clear and strong response is crucial to make clear that such crimes are unacceptable and that there can be no impunity. We must prevent creating a dreadful precedent for the use of chemical weapons in Syria again or elsewhere. The EU underscores at the same time the need to move forward with addressing the Syrian crisis through the UN process. We note the ongoing UN investigation on the 21st of August attack and further investigations on other chemical weapons attacks carried out in this conflict. It hopes a preliminary report of this first investigation can be released as soon as possible and welcomes President Hollande's statement to wait for this report before any further action. The EU urges the UN Security Council to unite in its efforts to prevent any further chemical attack. To that effect, it encourages the Security Council to fulfill its responsibilities and take all initiatives to achieve this goal. The EU and its member states intends to play a full and active part in that context. The EU recalls the individual responsibility of the perpetrators of attacks of this type, who must be held accountable, and the role of the ICC in investigating and judging such acts. Only a political solution can end this terrible bloodshed, grave violation of human rights, and the far-reaching destruction of Syria. An encompassing diplomatic process leading to a political solution is now more urgent than ever. The initiative for a Geneva II peace conference must move ahead swiftly. The EU is ready to provide all the support needed to achieve a political settlement and to work with partners and international actors, in particular the United Nations. The EU will uphold its commitment as the largest donor to provide aid and assistance to those in need due to the Syrian conflict. It will maintain its readiness to help the recovery, rehabilitation and transition in Syria in accordance with the needs of the Syrian people. Thank you.
Minister, over to you.
Thank you very much. My task is much easier, just to full support to what was said by Cathy, by High Representative. Also, thank you for nice words and very efficient guiding of our discussions, as usually. Let me just add to what was said a few points from my perspective. On CSDP, we really need coordinated efforts and also address modern new challenges, in particular cyber defense, energy issues are important. We need to coordinate our plans and our actions with other organizations and actors, and just to mention NATO, United Nations, United States, what we are doing, by the way, consulting. On Eastern Partnership, very important, we strongly supported, and all colleagues who were speaking, strong support and so to say solidarity with those who have chosen European path, expressed European aspirations, and we will engage with our Eastern partners even more in the run-up to the summit, which will take place, as we all know, in the end of November. We would like to do the best we can do in order to make it success, and full support. And third, on Syria, not much to add. Indeed, this is common position, very valuable to have this common approach, and as it was already said, condemnation of the acts, accountability of perpetrators, important role for United Nations and results for the inspections, need for political solution, need for humanitarian aid. So, thank you.
Thanks very much. I'll go to Lawrence first. Microphone is coming there. Can we have a mic?
It's here.
From Wall Street Journal, a couple of questions on the statement and then one on the Eastern Partnership. So can we read the statement as saying that the EU would back a military response to the chemical weapons attack if that is what the Americans, the French and others decide to do? And secondly, on the statement, can you tell us, did Mr. Kerry pledge to wait for the inspector's report? And on the Eastern Partnership, you talked about huge pressure. You didn't name Russia, but it's fairly clear that's who we're talking about. Is there anything the EU is prepared to do to prevent that Russian pressure?
3 for the price of 1, Lawrence. First of all, we talk about a clear and strong response. You know the discussions that are currently going on. There were discussions in the G20 meeting, there's discussions going on in the United States this week. I think our voices are clear in saying we want to see a clear and strong response. We've also been clear, too, about the inspectors and the report. On Secretary Kerry, we didn't ask him to pledge anything, and neither should he. It will be for him to report back our discussions to the President of the United States, if he so chooses, and certainly for him to think about what we were saying, and that's for them. And then your third question about external pressure. The point about our relations with our Eastern partners is we want them to be free to make the choices that they wish to make about their economic and political relationships. We would expect them to have good and strong relations with their neighbours, including Russia. And we hope that they will come to Vilnius feeling able and willing to carry on the commitments that they've already made to work closely with us, especially in support of economic life and political reform. And I'm sure Vilnius will be a great success.
Gynnich's Baltic News Service News Agency. from what you said, have you concluded that the mandate from the Security Council is not really necessary for any military actions, as most would say that the absence of such a mandate would mean that there is a breach of international law? Thank you.
Well, I think when you read the statement, and you will get a copy of it very soon, you know, we say in it that we underscore at the same time the need to move forward with addressing the Syrian crisis through the UN process, and we urge the Security Council to unite in its efforts to prevent any further chemical attack and to fulfill its responsibilities. The European Union has always been a strong supporter of the United Nations and of the work of the Security Council, but we recognise also the realities of the situation at the present time. But we still urge the Security Council that, as this report comes out, to fulfil its obligations.
I'll take two more, just microphone here, please.
Justina Pavlak, Reuters. We were told by the State Department that Secretary Kerry had urged the EU to put off the planned ban on financial assistance to Israeli organizations working in the occupied territories. And I was wondering what was the EU's response to his request, and also whether in his update on the Middle East peace process, whether he had said that there was any progress in the discussions between the Israelis and the Palestinians, and if yes, in which area?
First of all, I've said it many times, I'll say it again, we pay enormous credit to Secretary Kerry for the determination he's had, not just in his present role, but over many years, to try and support the parties into negotiations. And we were delighted that he joined us in order to say more about his ambition. Inevitably, some of that was not for public consumption, but I remain optimistic that his efforts will hopefully lead to success. In the context of that, he was talking to us about different issues and elements. And I want to reiterate the issue of the guidelines, that this is putting down on paper what is currently the EU's position. But we will be sending a team to Israel on Monday, led by Pierre Vimont, to make sure that in the implementation we're doing so very sensitively. And we, of course, want to continue to have a strong relationship with Israel.
The final question is for Nicholas Busse.
No. Nicholas Busse, Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung. Could you elaborate a little bit what you mean by you note the UN investigations? Does that mean that the EU collectively thinks that any military action should await the end of the release of the report or the interim report, just as President Hollande said, or you're just noting the investigation and you would also accept any military action before the release of the report?
I think what you'll find it says is that we note there's an ongoing investigation. Note is not a particularly interesting word. It just means we note there is one. And we also welcome very much is an addition, my word, President Hollande's statement to wait for this report before any further action. So I think what we're very clearly saying is that we value very much the work of the inspectors. We understand all the information that we currently have. We see the strong evidence before us. And that we very much welcome that President Hollande, in his recent statement, has said he wants to ensure that he's seen that report too.
Thanks very much indeed for coming. As the High Representative says, we will make the text available to you just as soon as we've typed up a nice smart copy of it. So thank you very much for coming.